Hi everyone, welcome. We're going to get started. So thank you for joining us today for our Community Wealth Building Workshop. My name is Cassandra and this is my co-facilitator Kaylee, and we'd just like to formally welcome you all to this space. So we're going to begin today with a land acknowledgement. So we are currently on the unceded traditional and contemporary lands of the Acknowledgment, the Hohokam, and the Tohono O'odham peoples. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing this correctly. As many of us here today are descendants of settlers, immigrants, and descendants of those forcefully brought to this continent, it is important that we all commit to learning and unlearning the violent and colonized history of this land. We must properly honor the indigenous peoples, elders, and knowledge keepers, past, present, and future, whose stewardship and love of these lands and all its beings allow us to be here today. It is especially important for those of us here today, as continual learners and actors in the local economy, to recognize the importance of uplifting and supporting Black and Indigenous voices. As we aim to build a stronger and more just community in what is now called Phoenix, we must center Indigenous voices, epistemologies, and practices, which often speak of connection and reciprocity, as opposed to traditional Western narratives of extraction, competition, and dominance. While acknowledgement means little unless coupled with meaningful action, it is our responsibility to acknowledge our complex history and privileges in this space in order to empower diverse perspectives and practices that will best serve our shared future. So here is the agenda for today's workshop. So we're going to do some quick introductions, and then we're just going to dive into a mini lecture on community wealth building. But the majority of today's focus is going to be on our panel, and that will include time for an audience Q&A. And then we're just going to wrap up with a brief closing.
Hi everyone, as Cassandra mentioned, my name is Kaylee, and I'm going to start by introducing Thrive. We are a women-owned and operated Arizona benefit corporation that started in 2020. These uncertain and arduous times, Thrive wanted to be a part of the solution, moving Arizona towards a more sustainable and just future. We aim to support the development of entrepreneurs and businesses who want to positively impact their communities, care for the environment, and experience economic security. This is a snapshot of our team. We have Hannah, our founder and executive director, Peta, our co-director, and Courtney, Allie, Cassandra, and myself, our sustainability consultants. As this is meant to be a space for community building, we would like to invite everyone on Zoom to introduce themselves in the chat, and everyone here in person to introduce yourselves to those next to you. I think a lot of you have started doing that, but let's take a minute or so to do that. Okay, I don't want to interrupt conversation. Okay, thank you everyone. So Thrive is partnered with the City of Phoenix on cooperative ecosystem development. This partnership has led to the graduation of 2 cohorts of entrepreneurs from our Sustainable Cooperative Food Business Training Program and facilitation of 4 workshops on cooperative infrastructure. This is the 4th and final one of this year. Today's workshops, we have 5 main objectives. We will develop an understanding of community wealth and how it can be built, to grow your own knowledge in social entrepreneurship, especially cooperative businesses. for you all to be able to identify tangible pathways towards building community wealth locally and feel empowered to do so. Provide you with a chance to learn from local knowledge holders about how to support community wealth building projects and initiatives in Arizona. And to create space for you all to connect with other attendees, panelists, and hosts to build community and grow the local community wealth building movement.
Right, so we are now going to spend a bit of time talking about what community wealth building is and how developing a strong entrepreneurial ecosystem, such as through the cooperative business model, can build community wealth. So today, our communities are being defined by social and economic injustice. Wealth inequality, already at high levels, has grown exponentially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Millions of people have lost their jobs, access to healthcare, and their savings. Meanwhile, the wealthiest among us have grown richer. Today, 3 Americans own as much wealth as the combined wealth of the bottom 49% of Americans. That is more than 160 million people. And this is not occurring by chance. So this is the direct result of the current economic system, which is characterized by heavy extraction and exploitation of resources, of wealth, of people, and nature. This system is also marked by institutional, social, and racial injustice, such as through redlining, community disinvestment, the U.S. Indian reservation system, and the general lack of affordable housing and healthcare across the U.S. And each of these challenges is felt even more deeply in Black and Brown communities, who have been continually failed by promises of economic development and revitalization. These compounding crises make clear that we cannot continue on the path of business as usual. We cannot create a more just future by working within the confines of today's extractive system. We are not headed towards a safe and just future. A more transformative and empowering approach is required. And that's where community wealth building comes in. So for the sake of today's conversation, we need to define wealth. So at its most basic level, wealth simply means an abundance of value. It's commonly argued that there are 4 types of wealth: financial, social, time, and health. And today we really want to add another category to your vocabulary: community wealth, which does encompass the other 4 most commonly known types of wealth. But community wealth is defined as the collective assets, social, intellectual, cultural, financial, etc., that a community owns or controls that enable the community to care for one another and the natural environment. So how do we build this type of wealth? What does community wealth building look like? Well, coined by the Democracy Collaborative in 2005 and rooted in the socioeconomic movements of the 1960s and 70s, community wealth building can be defined as a system-changing approach to community economic development that works to produce broadly shared economic prosperity, racial equity, and ecological sustainability through the reconfiguration of institutions and local economies on the basis of greater democratic ownership, participation, and control. So that's kind of a pretty wordy definition. So we're just going to watch this brief video to kind of help break it down.
Our economy is not working well for people, places, or the planet. Wages are low and work is insecure. Poverty is on the rise. Inequality between rich and poor is growing, and our fossil fuel-based economy is threatening the planet. But there is no shortage of wealth. The world's 8 richest men have as much money as the poorest 50% of the planet's population. And in the UK, the 5 richest families own more wealth than the poorest 13 million people. We have a wealth problem. Where wealth goes, who gets it and who creates it shapes our places and our lives. We need a change. Community wealth building represents that change. It's about building up our everyday economy, bringing wealth back home to people and communities whilst caring for the planet. This is common sense economics. It's common sense for an economy to deliver well-being for as many people as possible. It's common sense for wealth to be enjoyed by everyone. It's common sense for an economy to nurture the planet. So how do we build community wealth? Number 1, we need to make our local labour markets just and fair. 2, we need to change how public institutions spend their money so that it grows enterprises and benefits communities. 3, we need to make sure that the land and property in our communities generates wealth for the people who live there. 4, we need to create an inclusive economy with more democratic and social forms of ownership. And finally, local financial power and institutions need to work for local places, people, and the planet. The Centre for Local Economic Strategy.
All right, so now that we have a bit of a better grasp on the topic, we can look at it a bit more closely. So community wealth building is a full system approach that focuses on developing alternative economic institutions, approaches, and relationships, and then connecting them all to each other, thereby creating interventions at various scales throughout the system. So for instance, we look at this model. So say a community resident elect local and federal government officials in favor of community wealth building. These officials then set standards for local institutions such as universities and hospitals, incentivizing them to pay living wages, to purchase locally, and to use inclusive hiring practices. They also purchase from and provide resources like funding to local enterprises, which are owned and run by community members. These businesses, in turn, provide residents with ownership opportunities. So in this simple example, change is occurring at various places throughout the system, changes all geared towards the building of community wealth. So community wealth building is grounded in 5 basic principles. The first is plural ownership of the economy. So this principle looks to rebuild the connection between the people and the places that create wealth and those who benefit from it. And this means developing and growing small enterprises, community organizations, cooperatives, and other forms of municipal ownership, which are more financially generative for the local economy, ensuring wealth stays local. Second is locally rooted finance, which means harnessing the wealth that exists locally and making it work for local places, rather than looking for national or international investment. And this means increasing flows of investment within local economies and prioritizing the recirculation of local wealth. Third is fair employment and just labor markets. And this principle represents community wealth building's work to not only improve employment opportunities, but also worker rights, such as ensuring living wages, providing workers with real power and control in their workplaces, and utilizing inclusive recruitment methods. Next is progressive procurement of goods and services, as local spending can lead to greater economic, social, and environmental benefits. Adapting the procurement and decision-making processes of local purchasers, such as anchor institutions like hospitals and universities, can create dense local supply chains and supportive ecosystems for locally owned enterprises. And then the fifth and final principle is socially productive and just use of land and property, which sees local land and property assets as a base from which local wealth can be built, especially when owned, managed, and developed in an equitable and just manner. So that's kind of a lot, but this image shows the 5 basic principles as a wedge, and this wedge represents community wealth building's transformative capacity. So by powerfully combining the actions within these pillars to disrupt and displace the extractive economy, we can create a new model that drives a more democratic economy from the local to the global. So these principles are intervention strategies that work together to transform the status quo. So while the focus is local, as more and more communities adopt community wealth building strategies, the impacts will ripple outwards across society and relationships. So that's all to say that community wealth building is a full system approach that links community development with economic, social, cultural, and political interventions at a variety of scales to move toward a political economic system beyond corporate capitalism. And we just want to be clear, we're not talking about reinventing the wheel, right? Community wealth building is being successfully embraced around the world, but also here in the United States. So in Cleveland, Ohio, the Evergreen Cooperative stood at the heart of what is now called the Cleveland Model, which seeks to build community wealth by linking anchor institutions and worker cooperatives. In Spain is the world famous Mondragon Corporation, which is a giant federation of worker cooperatives. In Preston, a city in the UK, their city council has adopted both the Cleveland and Mondragon models to build community wealth. In Scotland, the North, I'm going to say this wrong, Ayrshire City Council has formed a special community wealth building council, which none of this is really all that exhaustive. So we have a little map here. There are hundreds of examples of where aspects and strategies for building community wealth have been adopted across the US. Some big numbers there. And so this includes a variety of models and strategies, right? All of those little numbers. This includes community land trusts, cooperatives and employee-owned businesses, employee stock ownership plans, community development corporations and financial institutions, local government partnerships with anchor institutions, local public and community banks and credit unions, So connected and working in synergy, these models and strategies can establish community control over capital and direct it towards alternative models of ownership and community economic development, which together help support the building of a stronger social entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so I'm now going to pass it over to Kaylee, and she's going to talk more about social entrepreneurship and the cooperative business model.
All right, thanks, Cassandra. So social entrepreneurship is the process of recognizing and resourcefully pursuing opportunities to create social value. Social entrepreneurs are innovative, resourceful, and results-oriented. They draw upon the best thinking in both the business and nonprofit worlds to develop strategies that maximize their social impact. Social entrepreneurs have comprehensive definitions of success, holding themselves accountable to sustainability principles while pursuing social, economic, and environmental goals simultaneously. They believe that positive social change cannot be produced without recognizing and challenging the dominant systems that govern social and economic spheres. They seek to address issues that are neglected by public and private sectors, establishing entrepreneurial spaces between these interests. One type of social enterprise is the cooperative business model. A co-op is an organization that is owned and governed by the people to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. There are over 29,000 cooperatives in the United States, and you're probably familiar with more than you realize. There are nationally recognized cooperatives such as REI and Ace Hardware, but there's also a budding local cooperative economy here in Arizona, including here in Phoenix with the recently incorporated Food Forest Cooperative and Phoenix Food Co-op. There are many types of cooperative businesses, for example, consumer cooperatives, which are owned by those who purchase the goods or services provided by the co-op. Producer cooperatives, which are owned by people who produce the goods and services provided by the co-op. Worker cooperatives, which are owned by the co-op's employees. And credit unions, which are owned by the people who use their financial services. And as you can see, there are many more. But regardless of the type, all cooperatives are informally governed with the same 7 key principles: voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training, and information, cooperation among cooperatives, and concern for community. It is these 7 principles that support the cooperative model in building community wealth. To illustrate this, we can draw connections between the key principles of community wealth building and the key cooperative principles. As you can see in this table, each of the 5 community wealth building principles is represented by 1 or more of the 7 cooperative principles. It's important to note here that the cooperative principle, concern for community, is tied to all 5 community wealth building principles. So now we're going to dive a bit deeper into this. Let's begin with plural ownership and economy. Co-ops are required to have voluntary and open membership. This means anyone can join a co-op, regardless of their economic status, race, or gender. Thus, no one is barred from ownership opportunities. Rather, local community members are prioritized. Co-ops are founded on the idea of democratic control and participation, which means that all member owners have equal say in the business and have the same amount of control when it comes to making decisions. As a form of democratic ownership, the cooperative model enables the wealth created by the co-op's member owners, which are typically local residents, to actually be held by them, rather than flowing out as profits to external shareholders. This increases the ability for co-ops to self-manage and feel truly empowered. Second, we have locally rooted finances. Rather than looking to outside investors, co-ops work to leverage the wealth that exists locally. For instance, one of the primary forms of liquidity is member buy-in. Other forms of cooperative funding include crowdfunding and loans from local credit unions or other community development financial institutions. Co-ops also take this a step further than just looking at how they themselves are funded. They also look to ensure other local organizations are funded locally too, such as by investing their profits back into the community. Now we have fair labor, fair employment, and just labor markets. As co-ops are often run and or owned by their employees, the people making decisions about wages, benefits, and hiring practices are the same people who experience them. This incentivizes paying fair or living wages, offering comprehensive benefit packages, and utilizing inclusive employment practices. Co-ops also train and educate their workers on job-specific topics, general business operations, and even on unrelated topics that are of interest to the members. Together, these features create opportunities for equitable and empowering employment. Next is progressive procurement of goods and services. Co-ops are usually run by local residents, which I've said many times, that this encourages them to source their goods and services locally and or from like-minded organizations. Likewise, they seek to offer their products and services locally to community members. In doing this, they create local supply chains. Indeed, co-ops are more concerned about providing equitable access to their goods and services rather than just the generation of profits. And last but not least is socially productive and just use of land and property. Through their operational decisions, co-ops typically make the choices that allow them to invest in their communities, peoples, and ecosystems. This can include how they choose to volunteer their time, where they choose to donate their money, who they elect to purchase from, how they treat the building in which they are located, etc. Co-ops are also inclined to partner with or support other cooperatives, including credit unions, CSAs, land trusts, and more. It is through this practice that co-ops use their purchasing power and other financial resources to support efforts in their own communities. So, cooperatives are a powerful tool for building community wealth. However, community wealth is about more than just creating cooperatives. It's about embedding them in the community, establishing strong relationships, and supporting other community wealth building efforts. Co-ops cannot exist in isolation. They require the building of strong community wealth ecosystem. To truly build a more just and equitable local economy, cooperatives must work with and alongside all the other models of community wealth building we mentioned earlier. Among others, this includes developing strong community governance partnerships, fortifying community development financial institutions, supporting local nonprofits, and encouraging the formation of social enterprises, all of which cooperatives are inherently structured to do.
And this is why connecting everyone here today is so important and exciting. So reciprocal knowledge sharing and connection is critical to community wealth building. And this is why we wanted the majority of today's workshop to center around our panel of local knowledge holders who are in the local community wealth building space. So without further ado, we're going to ask our panelists to all come up. We're going to give them a minute to get situated, and then we'll begin. All right, so we want to give a big warm welcome. We have Dave Castillo, the CEO of Native Community Capital. We have Gita de Jesus Lopez, the manager of Local First, Arizona's Economic Recovery Center. We have Michael Langley, the director of the Social Impact and Racial Equity Advancement Project at Greater Phoenix Leadership and the Racial Equity Advisor for Dream Spring. We have Kalila Martinez, the co-owner and head cook at Coldwater Coffee House and Bakery Co-op. And on Zoom, we have John Washington, the co-founder and executive director of Project Roots. So welcome, thank you. Never too much gratitude, so we can clap every time.
So to get started, we would love for each of you to briefly share a bit about your work and how it builds or seeks to build community wealth. We can start it. Hopefully, want to say something?
Sure. My name is Kalila Martinez. Coldwater Coffee House and Bakery, where we're grown in Avondale, which is way out west. How we seek to build community wealth.
Yeah. How about your work and these capabilities?
So we started our business in 2018, and we have this really interesting property that is like a big vacant lot in the back with an old house in the front. And it just lended itself to agriculture. So we have an urban garden, and that's actually how we started making money. We started farming it, and we opened a farm stand because we didn't know how to sell, which is one of our biggest challenges. I hope that we get to that. But during that time, we self-funded a renovation of our building. And for a year now, we've been open, and we have taken different businesses, I think, which would normally open 2 bakeries and a cafe and a coffee shop and a farm, and we've smushed them all together so that we could have enough money to open the business, right? But we're all our different owners. The goal is to be able to raise enough capital to then split off and have 5 different businesses instead of just one. So perhaps that's one way that we're seeking to build community wealth, is like pooling our funds in the beginning so that we can even open a business. None of us are from backgrounds that would be normal. We're from working class families where the wealth just isn't there. And so I think for a lot of us, it's pretty shocking that we are business owners.
Hi, my name is Viva Jesus Lopez. You can just call me Viva to keep it short. If you haven't been to cold water, I have never had that thing. So I'm the manager of the Arizona Economic Recovery Center. We have actually started this program. It's one of the newest programs underneath Local First Arizona. We've been going for about 14 months, and it really came about when we identified that there was a huge need, and I say I work a lot in the translation services. Not necessarily in the traditional somebody speaks English, somebody speaks Spanish, somebody who speaks the technical language needed for funding. So that includes your nonprofits, your private organizations, your rural communities, all of those, there's money available, so to speak. It's kind of maneuvering the gates of what they're wanting, what these organizations that are funding these programs are doing. So that's kind of what we work in. We dismantle the language of grants and other types of funding for organizations across the state of Arizona. And as of yesterday, we're at $13.9 million, so close to $1 million a month to organizations. And that's kind of the short spiel of the Recovery Center.
Thanks. I appreciate the introduction that was offered. Hopefully Iran is turning in her grave. Because the question was, how does the work you build, how does the work you do build or seek to build community wealth? And without the benefit of that introduction, the comments I prepared were, that I kind of bristle at that idea of wealth building. Wealth building is understood, aside from this model, in this country is based on, manifest destiny, constant work ethic. We've all been steeped in Adam Smith and Max Weber and Ayn Rand and Gordon Gekko and the like, right? So, our national ethos is soaked in those concepts, which is why you got to do the presentation you did, is to kind of see it and decide what's possible. So I refer to our work as wealth building, but spelled WELL-TH, right? Because we're really talking about social and economic growth and how we achieve that together. And if I were to talk about the work we do, it's pretty boring. Right? So it's the day-to-day, it's kind of what you would expect of the accounting and the reporting and calculations of the debt to income and all that stuff. But I think the real work has a lot more to do with building an infrastructure or network or an ecosystem that consists of people and organizations who understand the lived reality of Native people and have the requisite resources and services that those of us living in urban areas take for granted. I like to say that English canon law was used as a weapon to dispossess tribes, lands, language, and cultures, and that Western finance as a tool has either been used to further exploit vulnerable populations, or it's been withheld from tribes who could otherwise use those tools to level the playing field. So we're rebuilding the playing field. We're forging our own tools. And for those who seek to ignore or continue to exploit tribes, we hold them to account. So, we have automotive or whatnot, but a hammer can be used as a blunt instrument of destruction, or you can use a clod of the master's house of rebuild tribe. And that's really good.
I don't know if I can follow these three as well as they have made their statements, but I thought it might be helpful to describe both of my organizations. Does anyone actually know about reconfiguration? I feel like, okay, so some of you in the room, for those that aren't aware of reconfiguration, basically it's a consortium of CEO talent here in the Valley. We're actually celebrating our 50th anniversary coming up in 2024. And so we work on a lot on quality of life issues. And so a lot of these issues are interconnected, as I'm sure most of you in the room may realize. Things like attainable housing, things like criminal justice reform, things like education, things like transportation, and so on and so forth. And so really what we try to do at Creative Leadership is take a three-pronged approach to helping influence the community in that respect. And so the first is certainly education, right? When you talk about all these CEOs from different backgrounds and different industries, wanting to make sure that they are on the same page and understanding the assets that are actually out within the community as well. It hopes to also engage with other communities, other business leaders as well, to help them also carry that message forward, and also advocate as well for policies and in some respects funding to make sure that we really are making really substantial investments in our community as well. And as far as Green Spring is concerned, it's actually a 28-year-old CDFI that's headquartered in Albuquerque, but also has a very large presence here in Arizona. And since '94, really the mantra has been really trying to fund business dreams in terms of vitalizing communities as well. And so our view is that ownership really is the practical way to build financial freedom as well as meaningful equality as well. And so that's why we believe that also funding small businesses is really underscoring what we intend to do as far as reaching underserved populations as well. I think that's incredibly important. So we work with communities of color, we work with veterans, we work with the various other communities. And so we believe that's a way to really help catalyze a lot of the change that we wish to see.
Deanna,
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. I did my best to hear everything, but can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you great.
Wonderful. Well, I've got my hands in quite a few different things. So I literally am just going to make a list of the things that the projects that we have our hands in and how it ties into community wealth. So for Project Roots, our first mission is we can distribute the food, but it's different when we can teach and educate our communities on how to grow their own food. So we have 2 kids classes that we have every week, and we're educating our children on how to grow their own food. We also serve the underserved seniors and veterans as well. I heard that being mentioned through partners like Local First and Clinical Prevention. So thank you for talking about that community building and working together. We couldn't do what we do without your support. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Local First for help making that happen. I'm also a board member of the Phoenix Food Co-op, one of the logos that you saw in the presentation, and shout out to my board member, Huda, my newest board member, joining the Phoenix Food Co-op, and that being a grocery store that's member owned and driven. The third thing that we're working on with Project Roots here is, I'm not for sure if any of you know about the Prop 207 dollars that are sitting in this Justice Fund, and it's specific for BIPOC community leaders that are nonprofits serving the community. There's about $11 million in back pay, and that money is going to continue to appropriate. And how do we put those dollars back into our community to provide a safe place for our communities? And so if anyone's ever interested in that, I can drop my information in the chat. We are hosting listening sessions, and we're asking our community to come to them to let us know what you would want us to do with those dollars, with those millions, and how we can impact our community and make it safer. The third thing that I do is I am the Friends of the Farm manager. I manage about a $3 to $10 million statewide program and now federally funded program through the USDA, hopefully any day now, where I procure meat, dairy, eggs, and produce from all statewide farmers in the state of Arizona. And I send that produce either through food banks, agencies, or tribal families. The last thing we do is, no, that's it. So I think that's enough. That's on my plate, everything that I juggle. But I think that all of those initiatives most certainly line in with community wealth.
Wow. I'm just so excited that you're all here on our panel. This is so exciting for us. So thank you all for sharing a little bit about what you all do. I think it's pretty clear from what we just heard that all of y'all's work ties pretty closely to all 5 of those community wealth building principles that we introduced at the beginning. But 2 principles really stand out, right? Plural ownership of the economy and locally rooted finance. So our next question is, could you speak to the synergies that exist between the work that you all do in relation to these 2 principles?
I'll take a shot at it since I have the mic. Access to capital and resources, I think, are key in that respect. And so Citigroup actually did a study a couple of years ago, and they found that systemic racism actually cost the economy over a 20-year period, 16 trillion, that's trillion with a T, to our economy over that span. And so chief among those factors was things like the basics in housing, as well as small businesses as well, and the disinvestment of that. And so what we're trying to do, especially at GPL, work on a few things on the housing front. So some of you may have heard recently there was a 3D printed home that went up in Tempe. That was one of our members that took the lead on that project. So we're looking at innovative solutions in relation to really helping to scale up housing security, right? And that's part of wealth building as well. And so things like that, homes, also tiny homes that are out there as well, so things like that. But as far as specifically with small businesses, I've been working with this Association for Enterprise Opportunity on really trying to narrow the wealth gap with second chance employment and entrepreneurship, as well as launching a pilot for early phase Black women entrepreneurs as well, and get them connected with capital as well. And so that just actually came out a couple of weeks ago, so really excited about that opportunity as well. And if any of you are interested in learning more about that program, please find me afterwards. Thanks.
Before you pass the mic on, will you just, for those in our audience who might not know what second chance employment means?
Yeah, absolutely. So second chance employment is really working with the formerly incarcerated, those individuals who I call returning citizens, right? Those individuals, I think we are probably aware of how punitive Arizona is. Unfortunately, we have the 5th highest incarceration rate in the country. 90% of those individuals will eventually return home. But in a lot of respects, they do not have access to the basics once they are released. So they can't get housing because of their record, they can't get a job because of their record, in a lot of respects. But also, in a sense, they don't have their own identity because they don't have any credit as well. So how do we go about addressing all three of those? And so that's what I mean when we talk about sort of the second chance opportunities.
Thank you. And just as we move forward, if all of y'all can keep the mic as close as you're comfortable to your mouth, just so that our Zoom participants can hear as best as possible.
Okay, thanks. So again, the question: what synergies exist between your work and that of your fellow panelists in relation to wealth building? So we're also a lender, we're a lender, and I think the comment is that we have a spectrum, right? I said this on another webinar some weeks ago that our model as compared to some others that are out there. I mean, ours is a pretty colonized model, right? I mean, if you look at our loan docs, all the power is on this side, right? We have the ability to liquidate the asset and make life very bad for an individual business that pay us. There's another group that basically gives 50% forgiveness on their loans, right? And it's really the idea is to kind of bring people in the community to make an investment, right? With venture capital, 95% of venture capital goes to white male-owned businesses based on the coasts, right? And so we're missing a huge opportunity to invest in the people and businesses that can have real benefit at the local level. So that's what that group is doing. But we know that Native women businesses are not taken seriously. We know that they're not able to access capital in any kind of reasonable way. So we're going to make the capital available to them using not the 5 C's of credit, but the 5 R's of repatriation, is that what they call it. I don't even know what all the 5 R's are, but the whole idea is like, we don't care about the 5 C's, and we're going to make the investment, and guess what? We're going to pay off 50% of your loan. We're going to forgive it because we raise grant money to do that. So I think, all the full spectrum is needed, everything from groups like what they're doing. What we don't need are predatory lenders, right? What we don't need are business models that are destructive, extractive, and exploitative, that are championed by overzealous Western market practices, those that they promote. And so in Gallup, New Mexico, we have 50 payday lenders, title lenders, pawn shops, and exactly 5 real banks, right? The 5 real banks won't make loans to natives. The 50 predatory lenders would do it all day long. So the question is how do we get more money to native communities? There's all kinds of money. It's just the wrong kind of money. So we need the full spectrum of I think, organizations and people that, are, and we don't need the unscrupulous ones. We need the ones that are really committed to community and the work that's going on there. And I think that's how we work. I talked about the ecosystem. I mean, we're not part of an alliance called the Indigenous Economic Wellbeing Alliance. And it's 3-tier providers, technical assistance providers, whether it's a small business incubator or a training facility, or a women's advocacy group, a women's advocacy group, and then us. And that is exactly the right proportion. 3 support organizations and 1 lender. We definitely do not need 3 lenders and 1 support organization, right? So it's that ecosystem. We're continuing to build that out. And that goes at all levels. That's just the direct services in terms of how we serve entrepreneurs. Then there's the next level of how we secure investments, and that's a different activity. And then there's the work on the policy front in terms of working with regulators and turning the screws on banks on how they can do better relative to things like the CRA. So it's multi-pronged, but it is definitely something that we see as an ecosystem and something that we need to be working actively to create, stimulate, foster, and strengthen community across our ecosystem. That's how we work.
So following something very similar in Local First Arizona, we have to use a multi-pronged approach to kind of dismantle a lot of our current ecosystem around wealth building, because for a lot of new small businesses, entrepreneurs, even ongoing small businesses that have been able to survive economic turmoil, they may be the first ones in their lives building that wealth, not only for their family, their community, X, Y, and Z, but we here at Local First, we basically have to go directly to them and ask them what they need. And again, that's another form of the translation, because they have all of these bullet points that they're working on or in need of services, but it may not necessarily translate into that technical language. So let's talk about We Rise and Fuerza. They're 2 of our incubators, basically, to allow people who have brilliant minds, the ideas, but not necessarily the know-how to maneuver the systems to become an entrepreneur, own their own small business. Let's teach them the very basics of building your own business model so that you can have a successful, long career as a business owner. Then we escalate that a little bit more with our Move Your Money campaign. The CDFIs and the credit unions are the ones that are working directly with our community members to ensure that there aren't these predatory loans going out, because people will loan you a small amount of money, where a lot of the 3 big banks, they will you're not even in running for some of their loans because you really don't need that much. What's the return investment for me? And so we really want to highlight the power of the CFIs and our credit unions, because those are the organizations that will really focus on, I know this person, and I know how the reputation this person has in the community. I know the work that you are continually doing. And so we can definitely work, obviously, still within the financial structure system to get you money so you can move forward to X, Y, and Z projects in your work. For the Recovery Center itself, a lot of the organizations that we work with, so right now we're probably just shy of 500 organizations that are in need of something. A lot of them don't have working capital past $50,000. To a large financial institution, that doesn't seem like a big thing, and I don't see where that can be, again, that return value. But we want to basically work ourselves out of a job. I want to make sure that you have the tools, access, and resources, and that includes education, finances, and even just somebody who has done the work that you're doing, walk the walk that you're working, to kind of guide you through that process. So, we have organizations, like entire counties, that have never applied for a federal grant. They're missing basic infrastructure systems to run their communities. And so we will guide them through the entire application process, walking hand in hand with them. Ask as many questions as you need, because we have worked with these institutions that are going to be funding these programs. We have organizations who are getting their first STEM incubators where they are completely losing their workforce, and that's in our rural communities. We have organizations who are basically trying to preserve their farmland because they are the producers for that community, and they're like, I can't even produce enough for my neighbors surrounding the space. And so we have to tackle all of those things, which means, yes, you're busy, but they all know better about what they need than we do. And so we basically show up in the way that they are asking us to.
So there are two principles here: plural ownership and locally rooted finance. And I really wish that I had taken pictures of the slides, because as they were going on, they were so informative. And I was like, yes. And I'm really having a hard time remembering the slide for plural ownership. So I'm going to focus on locally rooted finance. Yes. I'm already excited. I'm locally rooted finance, and I'm so appreciative of Deion Washington, because Project Roots is such an inspiration to me personally as a member of Coldwater, because we have an urban farm and we lean towards agriculture. It's not the only thing that we do, but Project Roots, I don't know all of your organization, but it seems like that's what it is. It is agriculture. It is doing the agriculture. It is teaching adults, like people who can go do the agriculture, also teaching children, but I mean, there's a difference, right? You teach kids, you teach adults agriculture. It's different, but it's important. That work is so inspiring to me, because agriculture, we talk a lot on our Coldwater team about the power of our farm. We're in Old Town Avondale, so we're in the middle of the city. I mean, it's a historic old town, so we're surrounded by suburbs, and then we're in this really interesting old place that used to have Main Street and had houses and schools and churches, a whole town, but it's just 1 square mile surrounded by suburbs. So anyway, we have a farm there. We have an urban farm that people can come to our coffee shop and they're like, what's that growing up there? We harvest the stuff, we put it on our menu. We have a little farm store in the front, we sell it on our farm store. We tell people that, and they're so inspired because they can just see where their food comes from. And very few of us can say that. All right, I shop at Sprouts, I shop at Fry's. I don't know where that stuff comes from, but I know when I eat my collard greens, it comes from my farm. And that's really cool. And so, locally rooted finance, we partner with a lot of local food producers. We are members of Sun Produce, which is a farming co-op. We're buying members, and we also sell to the co-op. We buy from a lot of, our honey comes from Buckeye, our coffee comes from Chandler. Our other things that we do to supplement, because we can't make it all, we put our dollars into other local businesses, and they put their dollars into us. I think it's super cool when local first people come and eat at our spot, because Avondale is not close. And they trek out there and support us. They support us emotionally, mentally and financially. And it's heartening, and it's important because it makes our business go forward. It gives us hope, and it's fun. It's really fun to see different people who I've seen through the different in different spaces here together, or because we're in that same work. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Definitely makes sense. Deion?
Man, my face hurts from smiling so much. So much love to you all, and definitely to you particularly. I need to come see you though. I need to come see your farm and visit with you and buy some of your produce and support you, with these dollars, but love to you. And that's really what, it is what we do. We like to support our farms. I'm one of the, African-American aggregators that people trust. And when they see me coming, to their farm, they know I have good intentions. And that's like number one, is the first thing is the trust between the farm. And so I would say for me, I kind of wrote down some things. I think technical assistance is huge because a lot of times farmers and just business owners, I've owned other businesses. I didn't have the time, the bandwidth, or the knowledge to go and apply for those dollars or be a product of the We Rise program with Local First, which we did. It's just, how do we get that information out? And then how do we get people to either one, help us apply for it, or make it easy for us to access and benefit from it. And then I was going to say something else, but I just got caught up in all the feels and the love from you. So thanks again. But I would just say, doing what we're already doing in this community. Sun Produce is an excellent example of a co-op mentality. They are huge supporters of producers. I'm one of their customers as well. And she's right. I buy from everywhere, honey from Buckeye, beef from up north, chicken eggs from South Phoenix. And that's all to Cindy's credit and Sun Produce's credit, because they go build those relationships with those farmers when some of us can't, or we just don't know about them. So I think continuously having those types of entities, and again, I know I throw a lot of love at Local First, but I really do believe that your team and your leader, Kimber, have this heart for community, and you're always thinking of us. Oh, it was another thing I wrote down, policy work. I think that's one area we can grow in. I think we're scared as business owners and nonprofits to sometimes speak up to our leaders that we've elected in office to say, hey, this farm bill is coming up, and let me introduce you to this farmer who is a product of this program, and why it's important to include the program in this year's farm bill that gets updated every so often. So just not being afraid to step out there and learn policy. I don't know a lot of it, but I'm learning, because that's really a part of the change.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so our next question is, well, community wealth building, it seeks to empower folks to recognize the transformative power that already exists in their own communities, instead of more traditional forms of community development, which often breaks people to look outwards. This means encouraging communities to utilize the assets, knowledge, resources, and wealth that lie within their local spaces. What community-based assets does your work leverage, or what assets do you seek to create? And how has this helped you in your journey of community wealth building? Sorry, I can repeat that, that's confusing. Tiana, can I start with you?
Sure, no problem. I'm still reading the question. What community-based assets does your work? Oh, assets. I think I keep kind of saying that, as far as the assets part goes. I really do my best to really empower and enrich the community with financial dollars, And I think one of the biggest things is making sure these producers and people who grow things or can provide food for those that are less fortunate. I'm not going to ask you to discount it. I'm not even going to ask you to say, what's your wholesale price? No, I'm going to pay fair market prices, because I value you, your time, your farm, the people you have to hire, the gas you have to put in your car to drop it off at that food bank. So I think that's just one thing I haven't mentioned yet, as far as just making sure we're really building wealth in our community and with our farmers to say, we will pay top dollar for that carrot. Please don't go down on your costs, or how can we make sure your land stays there? Can we have an agreement with the city that they don't kick you off of the land after so many years? Just doing those types of things to help farms and families stay stable and really have an opportunity to see wealth. Agriculture is one of the biggest industries as far as billions of dollars go. There's no reason why our farms shouldn't be among the wealthy. And so how do we do that? It's just one of the many ways I'm sure we can continue to build wealth in our community.
You have a microphone, you're welcome to go next, but if somebody else is equally or more eager for the microphone and wants to go first, don't ever feel like you have to stay in this order.
I'll go, because I see y'all going like, I'll do it, So I wrote hard about these questions. They broke my brain. And so like community-based assets is really trying to figure out what that meant. And finally, what occurred to me is like the opposite is like institutional versus community. And college is an institution. And nobody on our team, oh, that's not true. We do have a college graduate. He graduated in sociology and he's farming. So like that didn't help, you know. Yeah, no, I mean, he's a wonderful person, but he's not doing sociology on a farm, you know. And like we have a high school dropout, you know, we have two people who like maybe have associate's degrees, and we're not like elite knowledge or, you know, acquirers. We're just people. And one of the things that we had to be able to do is educate ourselves in what we needed to do. So our farmer went to Steadfast, and he participated in a training that happened there, Steadfast Farm. And our baker went to San Francisco Baking Institute. He took like a 6-week class on baking sourdough bread. And our first barista went to Infusion Coffee and Tea, and they were offering barista classes. And Peixoto, who we partner with, they like send people to your coffee shop for free, and they will train your baristas. That's so awesome and super helpful when you're opening a coffee shop, but like you're not a coffee person, to get like free training. So the asset is knowing how to find knowledge, like knowing how to get training, and that it's out there. Maybe that's the asset. The knowledge is out there, and you just have to acquire it. And we don't have to go to college for it. We don't have to go to pay lots of money to get this thing, right? We have to pay some. Sometimes we don't have to pay any. But it helps in our journey of community wealth building, because I think a lot about our next steps. So we were 6 during COVID. We lost 2 of our founding members, so we're 4 owners. In the course of our first year, we hired 5 employees, which is awesome. But like, if we really want to grow, you know, one of the slides talked about how worker-owned co-ops find their employees in their community. And if we're going to find our members in our community, those members are going to be from low-income families. They're going to have the same potentially like not college that we have. They're going to have, you know, cultural backgrounds potentially that are different from ours that we're going to have to learn from. Like all of these things that are real, really real things that we have to deal with. And if we can we're going to deal with those hard things. Knowledge acquisition is honestly like easier. So I hope that's helpful. The knowledge that exists out there is
but it's true, actually. If you can really just highlight, there are an endless supply of champions in your communities. People don't really realize the value of, you know, your mechanic down the street. When you're a small business owner and I need my car for everything, that person is going to be the one that's going to help me in the toughest times when no shop is going to answer me. Things like that. What are the assets in our community? Everyone. Your lived experiences are a huge influence on how you show up in community spaces. And community can be, let's say you come from a multi-generational wealthy family. Guess what? You know the tools, tips, tricks, and trade of how to build wealth for people who don't necessarily have access to that. Imagine how helpful it would be if you even took 30 minutes to talk to somebody who may not have the traditional trajectory through schooling, may not have the traditional trajectory through banking, may not have the traditional trajectory through X, Y, and Z. We're going to have our local food producers who really are doing a sustainable approach to kind of preserving the land that we do have, but still utilizing it to take care of each of us. If we can't eat, guess what? Any of this is not going to be useful. Wealth building, sorry, not going to be helpful. That's just true. We have people who have access to physical facilities, which a lot of people don't necessarily have right now, because let's be honest, the commercial as well as residential market for actual physical space is chaotic, to say the least. And so we want to reach out to those people who have the knowledge of maneuvering the system of real estate. In terms of like the Recovery Center itself, we have a network of grant writers that are all locally sourced, if you will, but they all kind of know the realm and world, and that includes the geographic landscape of the state. Because it looks different north to south, east to west, we have really just quite a wild environment. It's beautiful, but we want to make sure that we have people who have connections to the people who may not always have a say, or their voice isn't necessarily loud enough to have access to the people who can really project it, articulate it in a different way, or maneuver spaces that really allow them to have that influence in policy, just to say in how things are shifting. And so I think we often approach it through this idea of fixed institutions, so the traditional education, traditional financing. Let's completely dismantle that and look at it as, again, what are the community members needing? Because that changes again from urban to rural, that changes from north to south, that changes from cultural backgrounds. All of these isms or intersection of identity really influence how you are maneuvering these traditional institutions. And sure, I'm here for breaking through all of the doors if we have to. That's kind of my approach to things, and it's worked so far.
Okay, so we were supposed to have a coordinated call for this to kind of talk about what we're going to do, and it didn't happen. And yet, it almost seems like we did, because like, I'm just going to toe the line. What community-based assets are worth leverage, and what assets do you see? And so, I'm basically saying the same thing. In essence, it's community. It's kinship. It's a shared sense of place and importance of where we come from, and our relation to the land and people. Some folks in our circles have pointed to entrepreneurship or resilience as a reservation, resilience. I like what our partners up in Northern Arizona did on Acknowledgment. They went around and the community group of Karis people, Navajo, and a few other tribes, and we asked them, we don't have a word for entrepreneurship in a lot of these languages. So they said, well, if there was a word in your language, what word would you use to describe the work you're doing? These were all data business owners, right? So let's see. Well, and again, the foundation is because they're business owners, but bartering and trading and informal economic activities take place all the time in these communities. So the work is happening, we just don't have a word for it necessarily. And so here are some of the words that are translated, of course, and what they mean. So one of the individuals said that they would translate the word entrepreneur, and again, this is about community, right? It's all based on community, the power of community, and leveraging that. And they would, one person said, to lead a life in harmony. Another said to think with hope and assurance. Another said entrepreneur means to take the gifts one has and work to realize those gifts in life. Another said creating with wisdom and strength. Another said simply doing to make progress. So that's what we leverage, and we try to leverage. It's kind of that inherent wisdom and experience and learned experience that leads to well-being. And so that's a lot of what we do is facilitate the creation of better ways that are based on traditional practices and institutions that sustain us, but that have been eroded. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. We need to do this for ourselves and with our allies. I think it was Frederick Douglass who said, it's easier to raise a healthy child than it is to fix a broken man. We've got a lot of brokenness in our families and communities. So building some systems and leveraging that experience and bringing that out and bringing it together, that's what we're doing to leverage more of.
I'm so energized after these comments. And I think a theme that has been emerging from this question in particular is a mix of both practical and aspiration. And so if I can, I'd love to share my aspiration with you guys. And so I have a big passion for South Phoenix. And so personally, I envision South Phoenix as Tulsa pre-1920s. And so I think we can get there, but again, have to be really intentional about that. And so for those who are unfamiliar with that era, Tulsa was actually considered Black Wall Street back then, really a beacon for Black excellence, at that time. And so I think South Phoenix has a real opportunity to do that. And so how do we get there? And so, with the potential disruption with the light rail extension that's going on right now, I think that it's important to really preserve a lot of those assets that are currently there for Black and Brown communities. And so what I've been doing, and a lot of working with Kimber over at Wealth First as well, and connecting with some multiple stakeholder groups in the area. South Central Collaborative is another, to name a few, but I want to try and help create an entrepreneurial ecosystem there. So we can really help scale up and empower and really help retain the character of that neighborhood as well. And so you have a lot of wraparound opportunities and really embodying that community investment that I've been talking about. So I think we can get there, and I'm really excited about the opportunity to do it.
Can I just say real quick, I'll snap around and I put the link in the chat if anyone wants to know more about Black Wall Street and the history about it. It's pretty sad, but also very inspiring. And I know we can do it again. And South Phoenix is a beautiful place to do that. So call me when you're ready.
We can make sure we include that in our follow-up email tomorrow, Dion. Thank you for sharing. Before we move to the next question, I just think it's really cool that money was not something that you all talked about, really. And I think that's spot on, right? When we talk about assets, we talk about community wealth, and when we talk about wealth, right, money is just a small thing, right? If in its simplest term, wealth is an abundance of value, right? It can mean a million things, and so I just think there's a lot of power in what you all just said. So now that we've talked about all the amazing, fun things, so what are some of the greatest struggles you faced in this space, and how are you overcoming them? And I know we've kind of talked about this in bits and pieces throughout today's conversation, but maybe y'all can shed a little bit more light for us. And again, feel free to bounce the mic around. You don't have to go in the order that you're seated in.
I'm happy to start with that because it's been weighing on me a little bit. But unfortunately, there's a lot of inertia when it comes to this work in terms of status quo, if you will. And so, ultimately, I see our goal is not to get people to think of terms like equity or phrases like racial justice or affordable housing in a pejorative sense, right? We want them to really view them as what they are, as assets, right? And so, it's I would say, an evolution from a NIMBY or a banana mindset, build absolutely nothing anywhere near any one mindset to a growth one, right? And so I think it really will take what I refer to as a tri-sector approach, right? So you have the public sector and government, you need the private sector and business, but you also need those social impact enterprises or nonprofits to help provide some of the implementation as well and some of the credibility that they bring because they are the ones that are doing the work and have done the work for so long. And so I see this as really being a complementary and a reciprocal type of relationship as we move forward from that. So that would be, I think, the biggest challenge is getting people to really embrace the change.
Yeah, we didn't coordinate there, but yeah, I mean, I think embracing the change for us has been a challenge in the sense that, again, as I started, we've been, double and triple soaked in these concepts of, you can be independently wealthy, you can, generate independent economic wealth for yourself, and what about everyone else? That's not part of the equation, right? And because of that, and I talked about Frederick Douglass's quote, but there's another more contemporary writer than Gerald Casey. If you haven't seen this talk on the Gospel of Doubt, highly recommend it. he said in one of his latest pieces, the greatest act of defiance against the system, against poverty, against depression, is to be well, or in Frederick Douglass's terms, to not be broken, right? Don't be woke, be well, he says. And so another elder, actually, of our CFI industry said, justice will never be achieved without a fight. It's easy to fight against an enemy. It takes true conviction and independence to lovingly confront our friends and allies. And to confront them with the truth that true wealth is spelled, as I spoke before, deleting equality. The problem we confront is that when we, I think people in our industry, right? Most of the leaders CFIs across the country are capitalized in less than $3 million. Most of them have trouble keeping lights on. Most of them are staffed with 1.75 FTEs, right? And that's to do everything: the origination, the servicing, the fundraising, the reporting. So the problem that we confront in our industry is that when we take corporate dollars, right, because corporations, banks, and others are always willing to kind of make an investment to kind of, as I say, get res credit, right? They want to affiliate with us so that they can show their regulators, hey, look, we need an investment in this community. But when we take those corporate dollars, I think what we must do and what we must advocate with our friends and allies is we must resist drinking the Kool-Aid, because too many of our allies and corporate institutions have not only drunk the Kool-Aid, but are drunk on the Kool-Aid. And the idea of individual economic self-interest steeped in and constantly perpetuating a greed-based economic worldview instead of a relationship-based economic system that still persists in our communities, that seeks wealth distribution and true well-being. So I really encourage you to read Ayn Rand, but also read Muhammad Yunus at the same time, right? Anchor the Poor. You can see very clearly the different worlds that they're talking about. Muhammad Yunus talks about, building a relationship-based economic system alongside the greed-based economic system. We're talking about here, they need to coexist for a certain time until we can destroy that completely. So we overcome by coming together, by standing together, by creating a forest of allies that can withstand the fierce storms that affect our communities every day, that create that brokenness. But we need to just kind of come together and build that strength together. So that's the challenge.
So instead of kind of repeating everything else that you've just heard over here, because it's true, I think it leads into this idea of solely existing and then scaling up, or really evolving into your next evolution, your next evolution of capacity. Working hand in hand with a lot of the organizations that I directly speak to on a daily basis, they are so used to kind of functioning on a thread. They're so used to functioning where, the 3 people that do work in the organizations are wearing 7 different hats and are going. There's not a moment to breathe. And so what we want to do, and that's when I say I really want to work myself out of a job, because as long as these organizations have the capacity to have those moments to breathe, that's when their innovation is going to continue to happen. So in terms of the nonprofits that we work with directly, they're providing the direct care services to individuals in their communities. That it could be through mental health services, that could be through financial education, that could be through technical assistance, or the gamut of categories. And when they don't necessarily have the capacity to do more than just a training every week for the community members, then we're losing their capacity to really build and strengthen the rest of the community. Maybe those that don't directly work with them, but people who work with those within the community, that's their opportunity to build wealth. What does wealth look like for them? That could be making sure that everybody has access to food, making sure everybody has access to housing, making sure that everybody has access to some form or type of education. And that doesn't necessarily need to look like a traditional route. But we really, right now, the system that we work in, that relies on the financial resources. So the money that they can get in to make sure that they have capacity to pay their staff, or have capacity to pay the contractors that they work with, or have capacity to keep the lights on. All of those things are regular challenges that I think really inhibits not only a person, an organization, but a community's ability to really move forward. And it's not necessarily progress, it's an evolution, if you will, of itself. And so that's really, I think, where our community networks shine through, because they're going to give you an opportunity to bounce ideas. They're going to give you a soundboard to really find the other avenues to find any of the tools that you need to make it to the next, instead of just the next day, you're making it for the next couple of years.
It's super interesting to hear that from like a broader, like local first perspective. I'm not sure, like a big organization. And then to think about that from like the small business side of it, because there was a slide up there that was beautiful. It was anchor institutions, little community, right? Anchor institutions and worker-owned co-ops and nonprofits and government. It all seems like it's going to be so easy and it's going to make so much sense, and we're just all going to decide that we're going to do it and it's going to happen and be done. I mean, obviously we know that that's not what it's like, but it's easy to get caught up in this feeling. And then I wrote down here, a group of like-minded people doesn't equal a group of people who will successfully build a business together. And so, you know, our group, when we started, you know, we all, we were approached with this idea. My husband was like, let's start a worker-owned co-op. And the 6 of us were like, yeah, let's do that. And we sat down, we did our operating agreement. We like had all these plans, and then we, you know, got into the grind of like trying to figure out how we're going to earn money, and step by step, you know, we went through the process. But the biggest challenge that we've encountered is like group-based decision making is really, really hard. And there's no way to get around the difficulty of that decision. And your friends may not be good business people. So trying to keep the lights on, you know, trying to like get from 1 month to the next, like those things, just we can all be super idealistic about being in a worker-owned co-op, but if we don't actually have the skills to run a business, like, what are we doing? That's what it feels like sometimes. And so we're overcoming that by just sheer force of will. Like, we're gonna be professionals. And so each day, like, we take it step by step and we reach out. It's really a gift from God, like the people who come to us and like help us out, honestly. And I think that I don't know, maybe that's just the world works that way, and like we all have those stories, but we've really received a lot of help on growing up. You know, like we went through and that was a wonderful program, a business accelerator program. I was the one who went through it. And I was like, oh, I feel like a business owner now. I mean, I had already like we were 2 years into our co-op when I went through that program. I know I'm rambling, but it's like these struggles, they really force you to grow up. And I've really seen that on our team. I've seen a lot of maturity and looking at the struggles. Don't obviously like don't focus on them, because I'm not gonna have anybody overcome them like at all. And I think the last one that I really wanted to share is that, you know, with that image of the community, like to be a member of a worker-owned co-op, like it forces you. I mean, obviously, like you're a boss, you're an owner, you own the business, right? But when it's just community members who are welcomed into this ecosystem, like how many people do we know who've even been supervisors? How many have been managers? How many have been on a board of directors? Like none of them. And yet we're welcoming them into like this business to be our business partners. And it doesn't make any sense because they're not going to have the skills like we didn't have the skills or we don't have the skills. It's a huge challenge. And overcoming them is having those people who will come to you and say, I see that you're struggling. And I have some help for you. That is definitely a way, a really big deal.
Yeah, I will say, I just will say, I don't know where you were, Kalia, when we were founding our board, but we needed to hear that because we literally did that. We went and found 5 friends that could just be on our board and sign our bylaws so that we could be a 501c3, and that was a nightmare, because we were all friends, but we had no business skill. Okay, I have my MBA, but even my co-founder, she's a basketball player, not a businesswoman, and so it was bad. It was ugly and it was yuck, and then we started to reach out. We were blessed to get Nona Lee with the Diamondback. She's an actual attorney who was like, stop doing these things or you're going to get your 501c3 taken away, Dion and Bridget. And so just having those professionals in your decision-making as a business is just so crucial and it's valuable. And so if you don't have those type of people, team up with Local First. They've got this whole center of grant writers. We use them and we've gotten funding from it, by the way. Maybe accountants, thank God we haven't had to get consulted by them yet, but maybe we should. Maybe we should be audited. Why aren't we talking about those things? And it's because that's not what we do every day. So just thinking about that, we're a nonprofit. And so a lot of times we thought, oh, well, we'll just write grants. But a lot of the grants with these big foundations that are in Arizona, like Virginia G. Piper, just to name one, has a 3-year requirement. And we're just getting started. We're not even 3-year-old yet. We'll be 3 in November. And of course, we're going to really be aggressive about reaching out to those foundations finally and saying, we're here, we were able to sustain ourselves. We had growing pains, but we're doing great. And we made it to year 3. But my thing is why year 3? And who made that rule? And why are all these foundations following it just because one did? That's my rebel question that I'll probably never ask the foundation itself that I'm asking for money, but I really want to know that. Maybe Community Foundation will speak on our behalf, but really just they make us jump through red tape or they make us wait a long time. And I think that people that look like me and a lot of people in this room and on this panel, we don't have 3 years. We're trying to hire people. We still have families that we have to raise. I have 3 teenagers that are all either in choir or doing something. I can't do it all. I want to be able to have some capital to hire very competent people to help me run this organization. And I have to wait 3 years. So that's one thing. Going to sponsors who have never heard of you and making them believe your mission, practicing. I learned I had to practice my story and I had only 11 seconds to do it, or I had a quick email or 15 minutes of time from someone. And how can I wrap all of that up and coach myself and practice with my board member on how to do that? Tell your story. Oh, and one more thing. How can you tell it silently? Do you have signs? Do you have t-shirts that you can share and give those to family members who can start to see your logo and your business and what you're doing? And then partnering with those that have been doing it. One of our other big partners was Tiger Mountain Foundation. Darren has been doing this much longer than Project Roots. He's kind of like a big brother to us. And so we latched on to him. He wrote us into a federal grant that we didn't have to be 3 years on. We were a mini grant from it. And that's how he's one of our biggest financial supporters. He's been able to carry us in that grant. And just the last point, your board members and your business partners should not be your friends unless you all think alike. And unless you see each other's strengths and trust one another that I can do this part and you can do this part. I'm not going to question you and I don't want you over here either. Now we'll report to each other. We'll know what the right hand and the left hand are doing, but how can we honor one another and respect our own crafts and expertness on, what it is that we do? So I know that was a lot, but boy, that's a loaded question, you know, and if you ask someone that will be transparent like myself, you know, just tell me, if you want to call me and ask me questions, I'll tell you everything we did wrong and how we really changed with partners like Local First and started to do some things right.
I think what's really amazing about what you all just said and what really stands out is that we are taught to think about individual wealth, and we are taught to make decisions for the individual, right? And so having to unlearn or relearn how to make decisions as a community, as a collective, right? We're not taught how to do that. That is really hard work. And so this is the worst, it's so hard, but it is so important, right? We can't build community wealth without really establishing community. And I think that that's super powerful.
So, well, we still always have questions for you all. We would like to give you the time and audience to ask the questions. So if you are on Zoom, you can please write your questions in the chat and we'll just have someone from our team read it out. Or if anyone in the room has questions, you can bring in the microphone.
Can I make this work? Yeah, that's what I do.
Two brothers on the hand right there. Mike?
Yep.
Dave? I can't see the Dave. Dave, okay, Dave. Where you guys get your mic? What's coming? Dave. Or Dave first.
Yeah. So it's been a long road. We originally got an injection of equity of 2.5 million. From the city, 2.5 million. And this was during Janet Napolitano's governorship. And we did kind of what I'm still doing today, which is kind of go to the map on this issue of access to capital to, you know, and talk about it to anyone who will listen. She listened. And she made that available to us. Since then, the Department of Treasury makes funds available to us. And then we've raised both debt and equity from foundations, fund of funds, as well as because of the UCRA regulations, we're now, as someone from the Mississippi Gulf Coast and other senior advisor, we've got more attention from banks in the last 4 months and the last 40 years. So this new administration and the changes to CRA are encouraging banks to do the right thing. And right now we've got a commitment from one. We've got another that's just that we're going to be drafting docs on, another that we'll come through underwriting now, and a fourth one that we're in initial discussion with, and a fifth that is going to the regulators so they can kind of do something out of the ordinary. But that's been a long time coming. We were $2.5 million for like 7 years. I thought we'd get this thing off and running in 3. I thought we'd get to 10 million in 3 years. And we didn't get to that point until 2019. So that's where we got away from. And we, you know, when I said we would be a $10 million organization, you know, that was back in 2003. And the reality is we're going to be a $100 million organization. So we got to keep raising the cash.
CDFI, or do you issue any plastic cards?
No, we're not a depository institution. We're simply a loan fund.
Okay, loan fund.
Yeah, very similar to Dave. We are about 85% self-sufficient, which
you're a CDFI.
CDFI, yes. But the sort of the gap that we aren't self-sufficient comes from the federal government. It's come from philanthropic dollars and some from the bigger banks as well. So, but yeah, we did try to use as much as our own cash as possible. Correct. That's right. Mm-hmm. They do.
Any other loan guarantee program besides SBI?
Yeah, they were just in it. Well, I would tell you, recently, especially with the COVID disruption, the Paycheck Protection Program was certainly something that DreamSpring participated in, and that provided some guarantees as well for not only the organization, but also borrowers as well. So that had been a huge benefit for the organization as well as clients that we serve as well.
We use the VA or guarantee and loan insurance program. It's 90% guarantee. And then
What company is that?
Bureau of Indian Affairs. So it's a Department of Interior. Bureau of Indian Affairs. And then HUD 94, which is 100% guarantee for our home loans. And then there's the USDR, the United guarantee, which is 60%. There's a couple of small ones.
You work with any farmers on the reservation? Do you have farmers on the reservation?
We don't do any ag lending. There's two groups that do. There's the American Agricultural Foundation, and then there's IQ10, which is based out of North Dakota, and they serve farmers, little farmers nationwide.
That's something that get built.
Do any of our online participants have any questions? No? Anybody else in here? Yeah.
Thank you all for a great panel, and Dion, it's great to see you. I think so in terms of access to capital, and especially in the savings market, the products that are out there are primarily debt. And one thing that as a co-op that we're really looking for is equity investment. And so that kind of patient capital that can grow with us. And as a co-op, we're able to sell shares. And so, you know, the debt products that we see, there are community lenders that are willing to charge 10, 15, 25% APR. And these are really, yes, you know, I know it's a hard business as a CDFI and a bank, and just want to ask what kind of, I guess, path there is for equity investment locally, because we know, you know, philanthropies have equity they can invest. Also, CDFI is another, one of our first commitments is a local credit union CDFI. So I wanted to put that to the panel.
Yeah, I look at PRIs and MRIs, their foundations, and we just got a PRI at 1%. 5 years. They're at 7 years at 2.5%. So there's a lot of foundations and foundation funded funds that are offering that type of investment. That's worth taking a look at.
Yeah, I would agree with Dave. That's one thing that we've considered. We would need an infusion of philanthropic dollars in order for us to do that, because most of our products are also sort of debt related. I will say that being a CDFI, we're different than the traditional financial institutions because we're a nonprofit also. So that sort of takes away that profit incentive to charge these exorbitant rates when you're lending out capital as well. For us, it's about actually serving the community. And we do actually have a goal of 10x impact using a racial equity lens as well. And so this is why we're really trying to focus on the underserved populations as well, because oftentimes they don't get any access to capital as well. But to your point, I wish there were more options out there to have an equity investment from, at least from our standpoint, and I'm sure other CFIs probably along the way. But yeah, that's something that we will look at in the future.
All right, anybody else?
I just want to say it's good to see you too, Ian. And Ian is the Phoenix Food Co-op. He's the guru of it all. I just want to give him his credit. So great to see you, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, I had a question. You guys all mentioned community being kind of this like prime asset, but mobilizing a community within itself is kind of a whole other skill. So you guys have any tips or things that work for you when bringing community together and mobilizing people to take action?
I was like, so nodding, so. Yeah. I think about this question all of the time. We're our core founding members, we all live in the town where our business is. And so we're a farm-to-table coffee shop in, I don't know, historically underserved neighborhood. I don't know what it's called, but like it's not wealthy, it's not white. So like farm-to-table concept is not normal. A farm stand or farmer's market is not normal, even though like, yes, traditionally, you know, going back to Mexico and like our long ago home countries, like Margalos, you know, like it doesn't mean it translates to Avondale. And so our from the very beginning, we would say to everybody and to ourselves, like the people from our neighborhood, that's who we're gonna serve. Our prices are gonna reflect that, our menu is gonna reflect that. These are the people who are gonna be our main customers. And no, they did not come out to support us. And it was hurtful. And it was like just a big question, like what are we doing wrong? You know, we set up out on the street every Saturday, consistent rain or shine, even through the summertime. People see us, they drive right by us. People still tell us, I've seen you guys here for years. And I just decided to come in today. We're like, why did you wait for years? Like, here are people, like come in sooner, you know? This is the answer to your question, but it's a hard one. So recently, we have decided that we're gonna hire a barista. And so we have to hire somebody. And people, you know, probably all businesses, people come in and ask for an application and we give it to them. And they're young people from the neighborhood who are applying. And, you know, our customers come in, we ask them, how did you hear about us? And they're you know, well, my friend or my Instagram or like, you know, I'm just driving by or, you know, I'm at the mechanic shop. So I think we're at the beginning. And the only reason we got here is because we were consistent. We were consistent in our space. We are going 40 ways before us. There's so much to do. Really, the last thing we have time for is to go knock on people's doors and say, hey, you want to come be a customer at our coffee shop? You know, we have regular community events that are, you know, from 6 to 8 o'clock at night when we're already in bed because we have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to bake. You know, we can't go to those things. So, you know, the ways that I see other organizations reaching out, we haven't been able to do that specifically. The consistency, I think, has been a super big thing. And another one is that we actually have a lot of support from the city. So they will buy from us, they will put us out there on their social media, they will put us out there in their magazine, and they'll buy catering orders from us. And through that, I think we're reaching a different set of people than necessarily our neighborhood, but still very local. Yeah, but I still feel like there's a key. One day we're gonna find it, turn it, like wide open doors, and we're gonna really have people from our neighborhood. I do believe it.
I think another part is being really intentional, right? When you think about the group of us who have kind of come through the CFI, the new CFI industry, you know, at least there's kind of a common understanding of where we're coming from and what we, you know, what we need to do. You know, if you get before tribal council, they will tell you what you should be doing, right? I mean, members of the community, there's not going to be any question of what they should be doing. So there's that side of it, and then there's just the work. But there's the intentionality behind the work. So, you know, we've got an entrepreneur who is a restaurateur, but his real knowledge and ability is in event planning, right? So his wife does the back office stuff. He, you know, sets up the gigs. He helps design the menu. And likewise, in your group, then, you know, it's I think like you were saying before, it's like we can just get a bunch of our friends together without even asking what their skill sets are and hope it works. Or we can say, you know, we need some representation from this industry or this skill set and move in that way. And I think one of the things that's helpful too is if you kind of look at traditional communities, right, there's a lot of protocol. There's a lot of kind of time-honored kind of practices. Like those didn't just come from nowhere. Like there's a reason why we do those things. And likewise, I think instilling that discipline in how we move and kind of bring people back, especially in the face of, you know, violence in our communities, you know, tremendous poverty, and, you know, all the social ills. It's hard to see through that sometimes, but, you know, it's you know, plan the work the plan. Right? It's some of this stuff transcends, you know, business and community, but it's all about what we've always done, right? People talk about that, about planting their corn, right? It's like, you know, just kind of throw a bunch of seeds wherever, right? We're going to do this in an intentional way based on the practices where, and we're going to get through even if the crows get all this. But there's got to be intention. I think that's the key.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll just say this. I think we all know that Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the country. However, it has some of the largest spatial inequality out there as well. And, you know, that makes it ripe for displacement of so many of our communities as well. And so I think we really need to do a good job of unpacking how the 3 I's of racism play a role in that, right? And so, I mean, institutional, inflicted, and internal racism. And so it directly influences a lot of that displacement that we're seeing. And so, you know, one of the solutions that I think that we can sort of glean from that is recently there was a poll done on trust, right? And, you know, which sort of entity is the most trusted? And it's business, more than government, more than religious leaders. So it's I think the poll said it's something like 71% of employees trusted their own employer to usher in change, right? So that's pretty much everybody in this room, right? So you know, we have the opportunity to really help control some of that destiny, right? And so Dave used the word being intentional. So I agree. I think we really have to be very intentional of how and where we invest in our communities, but using sort of that trust barometer in our head as the catalyst.
When it comes to you know, really mobilizing community and community members, I think it relies on our networks that we have immediately. So yes, it may not work for business, but in terms of like marketing, those are your best friends. Because any word of mouth is going to be beneficial to a business, to a nonprofit, to a financial institution, because it helps build that trust. If somebody I know who may have no understanding of the dollar wealth, I'm not going to necessarily trust them on some of their business ideas. That's just kind of how it works in my brain. I actually used to work in infectious disease, and they follow a model to really mobilize communities, especially communities that have cultural hesitancy towards certain types of healthcare. And it's called the social networking model. And so the largest really value of wealth comes in your social networks. And so I think really focusing and leaning in on those social networks to be your biggest marketers, be your biggest champions of these are all of the wonderful things that we're doing, come see us. And then we also don't know who everybody else knows because of how, you know, the world works, connection works. So being in this room, I'm like, how often have we worked together? How many things can we do? You're working directly with South Phoenix, and unfortunately, South Phoenix has been ravaged by institutional racism. And we are, you know, I think that there is a long road of building trust there that I think really has to be honed in on, intentional about. I think any of our indigenous communities, well, we've done lifetimes of damage there. And so how do we really hold space for them to kind of guide us in terms of support, but also allow them to be the spokesperson for us? And so, yeah, that's kind of, that's my spiel.
I just second everything that everyone said. I don't need to say anything else.
So that's about all the time we have for today. If you have any more questions, you can always email us and we can do our best to answer them for you, or connect you with someone who can answer that. Please give a round of applause for our panelists. Note that you all take away from today's workshop is that there's a massive amount of transformative power within our community, but also just in this room. We hope you all feel empowered to take this knowledge and move forward to build more community wealth in Arizona in your own way. It is through collaboration and connection that a more just economy will be built.
So now I just want to take a moment to thank all who made today possible. So again, first and foremost, our panelists for sharing their time, their energy, their knowledge with us today. Thank you so, so much. We're so appreciative. I'm a little emotional because this is just so wonderful. So thank you. We also want to thank the City of Phoenix, whose partnership made today's event possible. We want to thank ASU and Sky Song and all of those who took care of this space so that we can be here today and that make events possible. And then our caterers from Princess Mediterranean Deli and Market for providing the delicious food that we all got to enjoy today. And I can't see, but my guess based on how much food came through the doors that there's still a lot left. So please take keeping seconds, thirds, fourths on your way out the door. And last, but certainly not least, we want to thank all of you, our audience, your engagement, your participation, your attendance. It's why we do what we do, and we really appreciate that you're all here today. And now we want to invite our co-director up here to talk about some of the things that are coming up.
So this workshop signifies the end of our first year in partnership with the City of Phoenix. We are really excited that we've had the opportunity to work with the city for over a year. And over the next year, we will be offering 3 of our cooperative food business training programs, 2 in English and a very exciting one, which is going to be a first launch for us in Spanish. And shout out to our Dr. Mobile team at the back, Laura and Jessica. So we'll also continue to explore and uplift the future of Arizona's cooperative economy, laying ground for individuals, organizations, and institutions to support the development and success of these value-based businesses through workshops such as this, as well as networking events. And that being said, we would love your input on what you would like to learn and explore in these events. So please let us know. Outside of our work with the city, we also offer individualized cooperative business support. So if this is of interest to you, please reach out, please let us know, please connect. We'd love to connect.
All right, so if you have any other comments, questions, ideas, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We would love to talk more with all of you. We greatly value your feedback and would love to hear your thoughts about today's workshop, how we can improve. We believe in continual improvement at Thrive, so please let us know. So you can feel free to scan the QR code on the screen, and there's just a short survey. We will also send that link in the follow-up email tomorrow, along with some additional resources and materials, such as things that were shared in the Zoom chat, which you all don't have access to. And that's kind of it for us, so thank you. And then feel free to get food, to mingle, to chat. Community building can start here, so. Woo-hoo.